Howdy, folks. Welcome to Saddle and Sixskin, your home for classic Western stories and tales of the frontier. We're glad to have you with us. Are you ready to step back in time and experience the grit and glory of the Old West? Well, settle in and let us spin you a yarn that'll keep you on the edge of your seat. And while you're at it, do us a favor and hit that like button and subscribe to Saddle and Sixskin so you don't miss out on any of our upcoming adventures. What do you say, partner? The prairie held its silence like a closely guarded secret, the kind that pressed heavy on the chest, reminding you of the wide open spaces and the solitude that came with it. The horizon stretched flat and endless, broken only by the wavering shimmer of distant cottonwoods, their leaves trembling in the heat like whispers on the wind, and the crooked, weathered fence posts that marked Claraboon's weary ranch, a testament to years of hardship and perseverance. Clara adjusted her worn hat against the sinking sun, the leather creaking softly, and guided her mare, Juniper, toward the low sod house she called home, a humble dwelling that offered shelter from the harsh elements of the plains. It was a land where every sunset brought a new challenge, where survival depended on grit and determination. Are you with me, friend? The horse's gait was slow, deliberate, echoing Clara's own tiredness after a long day under the relentless sun. Dust clung to her skirts, a fine layer of ochre that spoke of dry earth and endless work, and her hands bore the calluses of work, the kind no woman could escape when the land was unforgiving, demanding labor from sunup to sundown. Beside Juniper, her rangy cattle dog, Scout, his mottled gray coat streaked with burrs from chasing jackrabbits across the endless fields, his tongue lolling from the day's heat, a loyal companion in a land where companionship was a rare and precious commodity. He was more than just a dog, he was family, a constant presence in the vast emptiness. Maybe you have experienced something like this before. He was the closest thing Clara had to a partner, a confidant in the solitude of the plains, and she often found herself talking to him as if he were a man who could answer back, sharing her thoughts and frustrations with the furry companion who listened without judgment. "Not a damn rabbit in the traps," she muttered, shifting the empty sack slung across her shoulder, the burlap rough against her worn shirt. Scout flicked an ear, acknowledging her words, but said nothing, of course, a silent understanding passing between them. His tail wagged once, as if to remind her she wasn't truly alone, a gentle reassurance in the face of hardship. Are you starting to see the character of Clara? Now that we have laid a bit of groundwork, how about we get more involved with our characters? If you are ready, please click the like button and subscribe to Saddle and Sixskin. Claraboon was 34 and had lived alone on the plains for nearly 7 years, each one etching new lines on her face and hardening her spirit. Once the Boone Ranch had meant something, her father's dream of a new life, her late husband's sweat poured into tilling the stubborn soil. But now it was a ragged piece of earth, barely worth fighting over, a constant reminder of broken promises and shattered hopes. Fences sagged, the soil was bone dry, cracking under the relentless sun, and even the cattle seemed to sense the failure hanging in the air, their mournful bellows echoing the despair of the land. It was a struggle to survive, a constant battle against the elements and the weight of the past. She stayed because she could not bear to leave, because somewhere deep down, stubbornness burned like a coal, refusing to let go of the legacy she had inherited. Her knee throbbed with every step as she dismounted, the pain a familiar ache that reminded her of her mortality and the toll the land took on her body. It had been nagging her all week, a swelling beneath the skin that grew harder, hotter each day. She told herself it was nothing, just an old bruise flaring up, ignoring the warning signs, but tonight the ache was sharper, biting into her bones like teeth, a constant reminder of the limits of her strength. A lot of folks in your generation understand what old injuries feel like, is that right? Scout nosed at her hand as she limped to the house, his warm, wet nose nudging her with concern. "I'm fine," Clara told him, though her voice betrayed the lie, the words hollow and unconvincing. "Just getting old, that's all." The sod house greeted her in silence, a wisp of smoke curling from the chimney where she'd banked the morning fire, a faint sign of life in the desolate landscape. Inside, the place smelled of wood smoke, leather, and the faint tang of dried sage she hung from the rafters to keep bugs away, a simple remedy for the daily annoyances of life on the prairie. It was a one-room shelter built for survival, not comfort, but it was hers, and that made all the difference. Not comfort, but it was hers. She stowed her traps, added wood to the fire, and lit the oil lamp, casting a warm, flickering light that pushed back the shadows and offered a sense of security. Scout curled by the hearth, his presence a comforting weight at her feet, while Clara warmed a pot of beans and a slice of salt pork, a meager meal but enough to keep her going. She perched on a three-legged stool, spooning the meal down with slow determination, her gaze far off. Now, it is time for some tough things to happen to Clara. Are you ready to see it? Please click the like button and subscribe to Saddle and Sixskin. Though her knee made her wince with every shift of weight, the swelling was worse than ever, throbbing with a dull ache that radiated up her leg. She pushed back her skirt and pressed gingerly at the lump just above the kneecap. It bulged angry and red, the skin tight as drum hide. She hissed at the pain, her breath catching in her throat. "Lord, have mercy," she muttered, though she had not prayed proper since her husband died, years ago, the bitterness hardening her heart against faith. Claraboon had once known love. Jacob, her husband, had been strong and soft-spoken, a man who believed in the promise of this land, even when it broke plows and spirits, his optimism a beacon in the darkness. He'd been taken too soon, fever in the winter of '75, leaving Clara with nothing but memories and a ranch that felt emptier with every sunrise. Children had never come to bless their home, their laughter never echoing through the rooms. Some nights, the loneliness was so sharp she thought it might split her chest, a physical ache that mirrored the emptiness in her soul. She finished what she could of the beans, but the pain throbbed until she gave up on sleep. She sat at the table, oil lamp flickering, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls, and rolled up her skirt to bare her knee. The sight chilled her blood. The lump had swollen, grotesque, red veins streaking around it like angry lightning bolts. She touched it and gasped when it gave a sudden, sickening pop, the sensation sending a jolt of fear through her. Scout's head jerked up from the hearth, his ears perked, sensing her distress. Clara clapped a hand over her mouth, expecting pus or blood to gush forth. Instead, something small pressed outward, pushing against the taut skin. Trembling, she reached for a clean rag, and with careful fingers, drew out a tiny bundle no bigger than her thumb, wrapped in softened rawhide, the material worn smooth with age. Her heart hammered as she stared, disbelief warring with a growing sense of dread. The flesh of her knee, once swollen, was already shrinking, as if it had never held this strange object, leaving behind only a hollow ache and a profound sense of the unknown. "What in heaven's name?" she whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and awe. She unwrapped the bundle slowly, her fingers fumbling with the delicate wrapping. Inside lay beads, intricately stitched in patterns of blue, white, and black, patterns that spoke of a different culture and a world beyond her own. The beadwork was Apache in origin, though she had seen such things in trade before. This was different. This was a medicine bundle, a sacred charm no woman had any right to find buried beneath her skin. Did you figure this was not going to be about cattle rustling? The firelight caught the beads, making them gleam like stars, tiny points of light in the darkness of the cabin. Clara sat frozen, the rag trembling in her hands, her mind racing to comprehend what she was seeing. Scout whimpered low, as if sensing something beyond her understanding, a presence that filled the room with an unspoken energy. She reached down to rub his head, needing the grounding comfort of his warm fur, a physical connection to the world she knew. The silence pressed in, broken only by the pop of the fire, a reminder of the fragile existence she clung to. Clara thought of Jacob, of his laugh that used to fill the cabin, of the way he used to sing hymns while mending fences, his voice strong and true, a counterpoint to the vastness of the plains. She thought of the night he died in her arms, his fever burning high, her prayers unanswered, her faith shaken to its core. 10 years she had carried that grief, convinced God had turned his face away, leaving her to face the world alone. Now this impossible thing inside her body, she sank back, tears stinging her eyes. "Lord, if this is your doing," she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. "You'll have to show me what it means, 'cause I surely don't understand." It was the first real prayer she'd spoken since Jacob's burial, a plea for guidance in the face of the inexplicable. The lamp sputtered out, plunging the cabin into shadow, but she sat unmoving, her eyes fixed on the bundle in her hand. Scout pressed against her leg, warm and steady, offering silent support. She held the bundle like it might burn her, yet couldn't let it go, drawn to it by a force she couldn't explain. When dawn bled pale light through the cracks in the shutters, Clara was still awake, exhaustion etched on her face. The beads glowed faintly in her hand, their colors muted in the morning light, but their power still palpable. For the first time in years, something like hope stirred in her chest, a fragile ember flickering in the darkness of her despair. The creek ran clear that morning, its chatter bright against the stillness, a reminder of the enduring beauty of the natural world. Clara knelt carefully at the water's edge, half expecting pain, but her knee bent smooth as it had in her youth, the memory of the throbbing ache fading like a bad dream. She splashed her face with icy water, heart pounding as she pulled the bundle from her pocket, the rawhide cold against her skin. In daylight, the patterns were even more intricate, a tapestry of tiny beads woven with meticulous care. Tiny mountains, arrows, perhaps even stars, symbols she couldn't decipher, a language she didn't understand. Scout pawed at the ground, whining as though impatient, urging her to action. Clara turned the bundle over, unsettled, the weight of its mystery pressing down on her. "Reckon Reverend Harris might know what to make of you," she said aloud, her voice hesitant. The thought of going to town made her stomach twist, a knot of anxiety tightening in her gut. She hadn't been welcome there in years, not since Jacob's death left her poor and alone, a burden on a community struggling to survive. But she couldn't solve this mystery herself, she needed help, and Reverend Harris was the only one she could trust. Back at the cabin, she packed a small bundle, jerky, a spare shirt, her late husband's Bible, items that represented her past and her hopes for the future. She saddled Juniper and whistled for Scout. "Come on then," she told him. "We're bound for town. Are you liking our story so far? It is about to get really good. How about you show our channel a little bit of support by clicking that like button and subscribing to Saddle and Sixskin?" The trail wound through stands of aspen and pine, the trees offering a welcome respite from the harsh sun. Clara rode in silence, memories rising unbidden, thoughts of Jacob, his presence still lingering in the land. Jacob had loved this path in spring when wildflowers painted the meadows purple and gold, transforming the landscape into a vibrant tapestry. She could almost hear his voice beside her, teasing her for riding too fast, his laughter echoing in the trees. The ache of grief was different now, less raw, more like an old scar, a reminder of a wound that had healed but never fully closed. By noon, they reached Pine Creek, the familiar sights and sounds of civilization jarring after the solitude of the ranch. The sight of so many people and wagons made Clara's shoulders tense, she was aware of their eyes on her. She tied Juniper outside Mrs. Peterson's boarding house, Scout sitting alert by her side, his gaze fixed on the bustling street. Inside, the smell of stew and fresh bread made her stomach grumble, a reminder of how little she ate alone. Mrs. Peterson bustled over, eyes widening. "Claraboon, Lance's sake, I haven't seen you in near 2 years," she said, her voice filled with surprise and concern. Clara gave a curt nod, uncomfortable under the gaze of strangers at the long table, their curious stares making her feel like an outsider. She ate in silence, aware of whispers the poor widow from the broken ranch come down from the hills at last, a constant reminder of her isolation and her struggles. Her hand strayed often to her pocket, where the bundle seemed to grow heavier by the minute, its presence a constant weight on her mind. After supper, she climbed the narrow stairs to her room, Scout curling faithfully at her feet, his unwavering loyalty a comfort in the face of the town's judgment. Sleep came in restless fits, filled with strange dreams, fragments of memories and anxieties swirling together. Jacob's voice, a child's laughter, words she couldn't quite hear, images that faded as soon as she tried to grasp them. She woke before dawn, heart pounding, and knew what she must do. She needed answers, and she needed them now. The church, Reverend Harris, the white clapboard church gleamed in the morning light, a beacon of hope in a world filled with uncertainty. Clara climbed the steps, Scout padding close, his presence a source of strength. She hadn't crossed this threshold since Jacob's funeral, when spring flowers had covered his grave, and bitterness had closed her heart to God, his death causing her to turn away from the church. Her hand shook as she knocked on the door, the sound echoing in the stillness of the morning. Inside, she heard the murmur of prayer, voices rising in a hymn of faith. "Come in," called Reverend Harris, his voice warm and welcoming. His study smelled of old books and lamp oil, a comforting aroma that spoke of knowledge and contemplation. He looked up in surprise as Clara entered, Scout slipping in behind her, his presence filling the small room. "Claraboon," he said gently. "It's been a long while." Wordlessly, she unwrapped the bundle on his desk, her hands trembling as she revealed its contents. The beads glimmered in the morning light, their intricate patterns catching the sun. The preacher's breath caught. "Mercy," he said, his voice hushed with awe. "Where did you get this?" Clara's hands trembled as she told him everything, the swelling in her knee, the sudden bursting, the strange healing, the events leading her to his door. Reverend Harris listened, brow furrowed, his expression a mixture of concern and curiosity. "I've seen such work before," he said finally. "When I served near Fort Apache, I learned of medicine bundles, sacred and powerful, each pattern a prayer, but I cannot read their meaning. That knowledge belongs only to their medicine men, those who are trained in the ways." Before Clara could reply, boot heels rang on the floorboards, the sound sharp and insistent. Deputy Calhoun filled the doorway, his badge gleaming, his presence unwelcome. "Morning, Reverend," he said, his voice cold and formal. "Ma'am," his eyes narrowed at the bundle, his suspicion evident. "Heard we had something unusual in town." Reverend Harris cleared his throat, attempting to defuse the tension. "Clara was merely showing me." Calhoun stepped closer, his thumbs hooked in his belt, his posture aggressive. "Indian medicine, witchcraft, some might say, folk around here won't take kindly to that." Clara's jaw tightened, but she said nothing, refusing to be intimidated by his accusations. Calhoun's smile was thin. "Best be careful, Miss Boone," he said, his voice a veiled threat. "Railroad men are coming next week, they don't like uncertainty, be a shame if rumors spread." He tipped his hat and left, boot heels sharp against the wooden floor, the sound echoing the unease he had left behind. Clara's hands curled into fists, her anger simmering beneath the surface. Reverend Harris sighed, his expression filled with concern. "I'm sorry, Clara," he said. "The deputy, well, he worries more about order than justice." Clara wrapped the bundle again, tucking it close to her chest, as if protecting it from harm. "Let him worry," she muttered, her voice defiant. But already she knew the trouble was only beginning. She could feel it in the air, a sense of impending doom that she couldn't shake. The boarding house creaked inside in the night, every sound carrying to Clara's restless ears, the building feeling old. She sat upright on her narrow bed, the medicine bundle heavy against her chest, its presence a constant reminder of the mysteries that surrounded her. Scout lay stretched at the foot of the bed, one ear pricked, as though he too felt the weight of the day's events, his senses alert to any potential danger. Whispers had already begun to spread through town, fueling the fear and suspicion that simmered beneath the surface. At supper, she had caught fragments of conversation floating down the long table. "Which charms, railroad won't like it, that Boone woman's gone strange up there alone," words that stung like barbs, reminding her of her isolation. She ignored the stares, but it was harder to ignore the gnawing doubt in her own chest. "We are coming down to the end, is this what you are looking for?" Click the video on your screen now to watch another unforgettable Western tale where destiny and courage collide in ways you never expected. And don't forget to subscribe and consider a super chat to help us keep bringing you more stories like these. Your support means everything. What had burst from her knee, why her of all people? She pulled the bundle out now, studying the beadwork in the silver moonlight that slipped through the window. The pattern seemed alive, shifting with the flicker of light and shadow. Her fingers traced the tiny blue triangles, the black lines stitched into white rawhide, mountains, stars, arrows, she didn't know. Scout whined softly, nudging his nose against her hand, seeking reassurance. "Don't fret," Clara murmured, setting the bundle aside. "We'll figure it out come morning." But morning brought no answers, only more questions and a growing sense of unease. The sun had barely touched the church steeple when Clara returned to Reverend Harris's study, her footsteps echoing in the empty streets. The preacher greeted her with weary eyes, but no judgment, his presence a source of comfort in a world filled with suspicion. He promised to write discreetly to contacts near Fort Apache, men who might know the meaning of the beadwork, men who could shed light on the mystery. Before Clara could thank him, the sound of wagon wheels crunching down the dusty main street drew their attention, a sound that heralded the arrival of something new. Scout barked once, sharp and alert, sensing the change in the air. Clara stepped to the door in time to see a small wagon drawn by a tired horse, its appearance adding to the mystery. The driver was a woman in a faded dress and shawl, her dark hair braided neatly despite the dust of travel, her face etched with weariness. Beside her slumped a boy of about 8 years, his face pale with fever, his eyes closed. The sight pierced Clara like a knife, a reminder of the pain and loss she had endured. She knew that hollow look, had seen it on Jacob's face in his final days, a look that spoke of suffering and despair. The wagon drew to a stop in front of the church. The woman climbed down, then helped her son carefully to the ground, his legs wobbling beneath him, his small hand clutching her skirts for balance. "Please," the woman called out, her voice carrying in accented but clear English, she was tired. "I seek Reverend Harris, my boy is ill." Reverend Harris appeared in the doorway, adjusting his spectacles, his expression filled with concern. "I am Harris," he said, stepping forward. "Come in, dear lady." The woman inclined her head, tears shining in her eyes, a mixture of gratitude and desperation. "I am Nail," she said. "This is my son, Tahu. We have traveled far." She hesitated, then added. "I also searched for something lost, a medicine bundle, my husband's. It was taken when soldiers came. I heard whispers it might be here." Clara's breath caught, her heart pounding in her chest. Her hand went instinctively to her pocket, her fingers tracing the outline of the bundle, the weight of its presence both a burden and a revelation. The boy coughed violently, doubling over, his body racked with spasms. Without thinking, Clara rushed forward, steadying him, her instincts taking over. Tahu's small hand clutched her knee for support, the very spot where the bundle had once been lodged. The effect was immediate, his ragged cough eased, his breathing steadied, the relief was evident. Gasps rippled through the small crowd gathering on the street, their eyes widening in disbelief. Nail's eyes widened. First in shock, then wonder, her expression a mixture of awe and understanding. She looked at Clara as though seeing a vision, her eyes searching for answers. "The bundle," she whispered. "You have it, don't you?" Clara hesitated only a moment before drawing it from her pocket, she knew then. She unwrapped the cloth, revealing the intricate beadwork, the symbols of a culture she didn't understand. Nail's free hand flew to her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. "It is his," she whispered. "My husband's. He was a healer. The soldiers killed him 2 years ago after they stole his bundle. They called it witchcraft," she said, her voice filled with grief and bitterness. Tahu's eyes, fever-bright, fixed on the charm, drawn to it by an unseen force. He reached out, his small fingers trembling, and reached to it. Clara's heart twisted, her emotions swirling. She remembered the empty crib Jacob had built, the child she had lost before birth, the dreams that had been shattered. For a moment, it felt as if the boy's touch mended a wound deep inside her own soul, a connection that transcended language and culture. Reverend Harris cleared his throat, his voice hushed with awe. This is no accident," perhaps God's hand is in it. Before anyone could reply, Deputy Calhoun pushed his way through the growing crowd, spurs jangling, his presence unwelcome. His eyes swept over Nail, her boy, and finally settled on the bundle in Clara's hand. "What's all this?" he demanded, his voice harsh and accusing. "Apache trinkets, sick child, Boone, what are you up to?" Nail stiffened, drawing Tahu protectively against her side, her eyes filled with fear. "It's Christian charity, Deputy," Reverend Harris said firmly. "This woman and her son are in need, we will not turn them away." "No," Calhoun sneered. "Charity is one thing, harboring Indians is another. Railroad men won't take kindly to this." Clara stepped forward, squaring her shoulders, her eyes blazing with defiance. "The boy's sick, that's all that matters right now. If you've got a problem, take it up with me." The deputy's gaze hardened, his expression a mixture of anger and contempt. "Oh, I intend to." He turned on his heel, boot heels ringing on the planks as he stalked away, his departure leaving a cloud of unease in the air. The crowd murmured, gossip thick in the air, their whispers following Clara like a shadow. Clara ignored them, focusing on the woman and child who stood before her, their eyes filled with hope and fear. She looked at Nail and Tahu, at the way the boy clung to her shawl, and knew what she had to do. "You'll come with me," Clara said firmly. "Boarding house has a spare room, safer there than on the street." Nail's eyes softened, her expression filled with gratitude. "You would help us?" "Yes," Clara said simply. "You and the boy both." Scout barked once as if to seal the promise, his presence a reassurance. That night, the boarding house brimmed with unease, the whispers and stares of the townsfolk creating an atmosphere of tension. Mrs. Peterson, to her credit, welcomed Nail and Tahu without hesitation, but whispers chased them from room to room, a constant reminder of their unwelcome presence. Clara sat by the hearth. The boy curled in his mother's lap, feverish, but calmer than before, his eyes closed. She set the bundle on the table between them, its presence a symbol of hope and healing. Nail's fingers brushed it reverently, her touch filled with reverence. "This was my husband's soul," she said softly. "He said it carried not just healing, but wisdom, a way to bridge between peoples." Clara swallowed hard, her throat tight with emotion. "I don't know why it came to me, why it was in my flesh." Nail looked at her with solemn eyes. "Because you were chosen," she said. "The spirit finds its own path." Clara shook her head. "I'm no chosen anything, just a woman trying to keep her ranch from falling apart." Nail's lips curved in the faintest smile. "Sometimes that is the very one the Creator chooses." Silence settled, broken only by the crackling of the fire, its warmth a fragile comfort in the darkness. Outside, the town's whispers grew louder, fueled by fear and suspicion. Clara could feel the weight of every eye, every suspicion, pressing down on her, threatening to overwhelm her. Yet, when she looked at Tahu, she knew she could not turn them away, she had to protect them. By morning, the boy's fever had worsened, his condition deteriorating. Mrs. Peterson wrung her hands, her expression filled with worry. "He needs rest, not all these prying eyes." Clara nodded grimly, her decision made. "Then we'll take him up to my place, it's quiet there." Nail hesitated, glancing at her son, her eyes filled with concern. "If you think it best, I do." They set out at dawn, the sun barely peeking over the horizon. Clara led Juniper, the wagon creaking behind her, its slow progress a symbol of the challenges that lay ahead. Nail drove with steady hands, her expression determined, Tahu bundled in blankets beside her, his small body frail. Scout trotted between wagon and horse, ears high, eyes sharp for danger, his loyalty unwavering. The trail was rough, but Clara set a careful pace, protecting her guests. Every so often she glanced back, catching sight of Nail's determined profile, her strength and resilience a source of inspiration. The boy's flushed face, a reminder of the urgency of their situation. By noon, they reached a small meadow, a place of peace and tranquility. They halted to water the animals and rest, their bodies weary from the journey. Clara knelt by the spring, filling canteens, the cool water a welcome relief. Nail tended to Tahu, coaxing him to sip water, her touch gentle and reassuring. "My husband was killed when the railroad wanted our land," Nail said quietly, her eyes never leaving her son. "He tried to make peace, they called it rebellion, he died for it." Clara's throat tightened, her heart aching with empathy. "My Jacob died of fever, took him and our unborn child, both left me alone." Nail met her gaze, her eyes filled with understanding. For a moment, grief and recognition passed between them like a silent bond, a shared experience of loss and resilience. Scout pressed close to Clara's side, as though reminding her she was not alone, his presence a constant source of comfort. Now they resumed the journey, climbing steadily into the cool air of the hills, the ranch now in sight. By evening, Clara called a halt in a sheltered hollow, a place of safety and solitude. They built a small fire, the smoke curling into the darkening sky, a signal of their presence in the wilderness. Nail hummed softly as she fed Tahu broth, her voice soothing and comforting. Clara patched the boy's worn moccasins with deer hide, her rough hands steady, her touch gentle. When Tahu smiled faintly, it stirred something in Clara's chest, a feeling that had long been dormant. We have now concluded our telling of the story of the Claraboon woman. If you enjoyed this story, click the video on your screen now to watch another unforgettable Western tale where destiny and courage collide in ways you never expected. And don't forget to subscribe and consider a super chat to help us keep bringing you more stories like these. Your support means everything. That night, under a canopy of stars, Clara took first watch, the vastness of the sky a reminder of the insignificance of human concerns. Scout lay at her feet, ears flicking at every sound, his senses alert to any danger. She held the bundle close, feeling its warmth against her chest, a source of comfort and strength. The boy's breathing was easier, his body calmer, his fever subsiding. Nail's face, illuminated by firelight, was softer in sleep, her expression peaceful. For the first time in years, Clara felt the stirrings of something she had nearly forgotten, belonging, a connection to something larger than herself. Dawn came bright and clear, painting the hills gold, a promise of a new day. Clara's cabin appeared at last, smoke curling from its chimney, a symbol of home and hearth. Nail's eyes filled with relief, her expression filled with gratitude. Tahu stirred in her arms, whispering something in Apache that made her smile, a language of love and connection. Clara stood a little taller as she led them up the last stretch, her stride firm and determined. The sod house was humble, but it was shelter home, a place where they could find peace and safety. Scout bounded ahead, barking once as if to announce their arrival, his voice filled with joy. Clara looked back at the woman and child, at the way hope flickered in their tired eyes, and knew she had made the right decision. For the first time in years, her cabin would not echo with loneliness, it would be filled with laughter and warmth. "Welcome," she said simply. "This is home now," the bundle pulsed warmly against her chest, as if approving, its presence a constant reminder of the bond that had brought them together. "Now tell us, were you surprised by this ending?"